Hey everyone. Welcome back to Strange Minds 6. I'm your host, Ruby, and today we're going to be reading Creepers the Scarecrow, Chapter 10 Fire. This story has been written by Edgar J. Hyde, and over 4 million copies were sold worldwide. But before we begin, my dear friends, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And without further ado, my dear friends, grab a snack, grab a drink, or sit back and relax. And let's get to it. Chapter 10 Fire. David! David! David opened his eyes. Sarah was standing above him. What happened to you, David? Are you okay? Sarah asked, a little shocked by the sight of her brother sprawled on the barn floor. David picked himself up, his legs still a little unsteady and his head sore from hitting the barn floor. He must have been unconscious for some time. He immediately looked beyond his sister. In the field behind her, he could see the still, dark figure back in its spot. Come on, Sarah. Let's get out of here, stated David, grabbing his sister's arm. Now, he insisted as his sister hesitated, staring out into the field, sensing the Scarecrow was the reason for her brother's state. They ran back to the kitchen. Mrs. Davies was working at the sink. David and Sarah walked through the kitchen and went upstairs. What is it, David? What is going on? Sarah said anxiously. We're in danger, Sarah. Real danger, David replied. David told her about his encounter in the barn. Sarah buried her head in her pillow, her brother's words sending a chill right through her. Sarah, I want you to get Mom and take her into the living room and keep her there. Make up some story about school. Keep her talking. Don't come out until I get back. David, where are you going? What are you going to do? Sarah pleaded, unsure what was going through her brother's mind. David knew what he had to do. He couldn't afford to wait until his dad got home. He was going to have to do it himself. His family was in danger, and he had no idea when the Scarecrow was going to strike again or against whom. He was already getting worried that his dad had been taken so long. Maybe the Scarecrow would see his family as a threat. Maybe it would blame them if the farm were ripped up and turned into a golf course. Go, Sarah, get Mom, David said, pacing the room. Thinking his way through the next move, David heard his mom and Sarah go into the living room. He ran downstairs, out the kitchen door, and into the shed. He knew what he was looking for. He had seen it the other day. Where was it now? David moved his bike. There it is. David picked up the old oil lamp. He fixed the lid. Good. There was plenty of oil in the bottom. David ran back to the kitchen. It was getting dark now. David searched the sink drawer, found the box of matches and stuffed them into his pocket. He ran to the barn, grabbed as much hay as he could carry. He stopped as he came out of the barn and looked into the field. The Scarecrow was still. David took a few deep breaths and walked forward. He climbed the fence, careful not to spill the oil from the oil lamp. As he approached the wooden monster, he had no idea what to expect. He kept his eyes fixed on it. It could move at any point. He had to take his chance. He had to take his chance. He had no idea what governed when and how the Scarecrow could come to life. He had to protect his family. David came up to the Scarecrow and started wrapping the hay around the monster's legs. David didn't take his eyes off the Scarecrow's face. No movement. He searched in his pockets. The matches weren't there. Blood rushed his head. Other pocket, he found them. He had to put the lamp down. The match lit first try. He put it into the wick. Come on, come on, he pleaded, urging the wick to light. The wick flickered and the flame took hold. He lifted the lamp above his head, preparing himself to smash it down with all his force. At the base of the Scarecrow, he hesitated. He could see the sound of a car approaching. David glanced around, hoping to see his dad's car. As he turned away, his eyes momentarily leaving the monster's face, he felt something grab the lamp. He spun around. The Scarecrow's face was smiling an evil smile. The Scarecrow reached out, its hand tightening around David's neck. David somehow broke free and ran. He could hear the Scarecrow followed behind, its legs speeding through the overgrown grass. He could sense he was close. David clambered over the fence as he had done the previous day, and he had read the words on the Scarecrow's head. As he landed on the other side, the Scarecrow landed too. The monster still held the oil lamp. The lamp's glow cast an eerie light across the Scarecrow's face. The Scarecrow moved around, blocking David's path to the house. David looked around, his desire for survival controlling his fear. He started to go right, then stopped and darted left toward the barn. He ran in and buried himself behind some bales of hay, the chickens flapping nervously at the noise of him rushing in. The Scarecrow followed slowly, knowing he had his prey trapped. David could see the light from the lamp's glow, lightening up the entrance as the Scarecrow walked in. He crouched down, trying to calm his breathing and think what to do next. He lifted his head slightly. His eyes found a gap between two bales. Peering through the bales, he could trace the Scarecrow's movements. By the movement of the light, he was coming closer. The Scarecrow's chilling voice broke the silence. David, I warned you. Now you must pay the price. David looked up. The bales of hay were piled 3 high. The Scarecrow was directly in front of him now, the other side of the bale. David took a couple of steps back and steadied himself. The Scarecrow spun around, sensing David's movement. David ran, jumped, and lunged himself at the bales of hay. The Scarecrow looked up just as the first bale hit him. The oil lamp smashed to the floor. Burst into flames. The Scarecrow's legs, arms stuffed with hay immediately caught fire. Within seconds the bales of hay were in flames. The chickens scampered frantically, trying to make their exit. Their noise added to the chaotic scene. David tried to pick himself off the floor, but the whole barn now seemed like one big ball of fire. He could just make out the spot where the Scarecrow had been. He caught sight of something. He recognized the Scarecrow's old hat. He couldn't see anything else except flames. He started to crawl forward, the smoke beginning to enter his lungs. He started to cough, struggling for every breath. The heat was overpowering. Suddenly, he felt something reaching for him, pulling at his legs. He tried to kick free, crawl away, but the smoke had taken its toll. Pulling at his legs. He tried to kick free, crawl away, but the smoke had taken its toll, and he had no strength. He could run no more. He felt himself being lifted in the air. His heart was pounding. He was helpless. "Come on, son, let's get you out of here." Mr. Davies threw his son over his shoulder and rushed out of the barn. He placed his son against the kitchen door. David struggled to catch his breath, the smoke still deep inside his lungs. He felt his mom's arms around him, his head swinging and his vision blurred. Mrs. Davies hugged him tightly, shocked at the sight of her son. Mr. Davies knelt down in front of his son. "Is it all over, Davy? Is he gone?" Mr. Davies asked, two hands on his son's shoulder. David looked at the barn and the flames leaping high into the sky. "He's gone." David stood up and took a few steps toward the barn. Mr. Davies came and stood beside him. They stared at the wall of flames in front of them. "The farm is safe, son. We're gonna be fine," Mr. Davies said, his broad arm over his son's shoulder. "The Scarecrow saw to it all, Dad. I'm sure of it," David said, looking up at his father. "He wasn't interested in anything else, only the farm. Well, he's protected it for a long time. And for the last time, it's up to us now," Mr. Davies stated reassuringly, turning back to the house. "Come on, son, let's get you inside." David looked out to the empty field one last time. He felt safe at last. And that is the end of The Scarecrow by Edgar J. Hyde. Tune in for the next book, my dear friends. This has been Ruby, signing off.